So there is the Losi 22S. This is the SCT for short course truck. Now the drag car, they're essentially the same thing. So I'm actually going to be taking in this video the drag car apart, but I'm just going to show you some of the differences. So the servo is mounted a little differently. The drag car does have these three main screws, but you need to remove this and this for the servo. And then if we flip the chassis over, you still have those four that you need to remove. So that's one of the differences here. For the battery, this one has this lower system where you mount the battery from the bottom. The other one does not. So I'm starting off with this, but I'm going to talk about the drag car. And you have this foam, so you can replace this foam to put the batteries. So really, that's it. For the rear, you can remove all of these and the whole thing comes out. And actually remove, if you remove these, that's going to be similar to the drag car, and or remove the rear transmission. And if you remove these four, that will actually release the rear back here, right? Or you can go back here and just remove the links. I would remove these right in there. You can always remove these. And then you have the screws here for the locks. There we go. So if you stick a driver right in there, those are the nuts, but that takes care of this. I won't worry about this. Electronics are easier because they're exposed versus the drag car. This is encased, so that's something that I show. But notice the rear shock tower is still the same. You remove those, this will come out. The body mounts slightly different here. The other one sort of rocks in the center, but this one has that screw in the middle, which is right over here. So on the drag, whenever I remove that screw somewhere in there, that's going to be it. The transmission's the exact same, so just look for that and you'll be fine. Keep in mind that this one has a rear bumper. The drag has a wheelie bar. So there's really just the differences, but the teardown of the transmission is the same. The teardown of the hubs is the same. The shocks, same process. So when I remove them, you'll see how to remove them. The arms is the same. So the arms, you remove them the same way. Front knuckles, everything is removed the same way. So this being said, let's go ahead and begin the teardown with the 22S drag car. Again, keep in mind, very, very similar with the SCT. This is the Losi 22S No Prep Drag Car Roller. Now, really quick, this is based on the Losi 22, which is just their short course. That's really all it is. It's their short course. So it's the same thing. It just has buggy suspension, just like they all do to make them narrower, but it's the short course chassis. So it's based on that with the transmission. Toward the end of the video, I'm going to give my opinions on this particular chassis. Along the way, I'm going to be making comments, but I want to do a just basic teardown of parts that I think should be mentioned, and then I'll open up the transmission, build everything, and then I'm actually going to build this, install motor, receiver, everything. But I am going to go over how to remove the servo if yours has a servo, all that good stuff. So the very first thing, we're going to begin with the receiver and electronics, well, receiver and servo. So the servo is actually pretty straightforward. In order to remove the servo, you have to remove these two pieces here, this one and this one. And what you do here is you remove this top screw, that top screw, so these two right here. Then if you flip it, you have these four screws. So those are the four screws you need to remove. Then these will come out. Then you can, once they come out, you can flip this over and then just remove the screw that's here and remove the servo horn. Or you can remove it from the link, remove this here, just pop this off. And then once you pop this off, well, I ended up popping the entire arm off. You can just do that, remove everything, and then install the new one. I'm actually going to leave this off. For when I install the servo, it's already off, but that's how you would do that. Now over here for the receiver box, it should be a 2mm. You have a screw right here in front. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this and leave this off because I'm gonna need this in order to install the receiver. So this one is getting a FlySky system installed. FlySky, you have another screw over here. FlySky makes very good electronics for the price. So for price point, very good electronics. So if you have a vehicle with stock electronics, and let's just say your stock electronics die, for example, Traxxas, or even Losi. Although these generally come with Spectrum, I believe. Spectrum's actually really good. But a Traxxas transmitter is generally going to be about $60, $80, $90. I don't know, it depends on how many channels. You can get a FlySky for about $40. So keep that in mind. You could also get a Spectrum for about that price. All right, so this has been removed. So this is it. This is where your receiver would mount. And then you would just grab this cover. And the cover would just go in there. Close it. Notice this little piece here. That's where all the wires go through. So your antenna would come out through there. The rest of the wires would go in there. And then this would just mount right in here. And your antenna tube, if you have an antenna tube, would sit right in there. So you do need a set screw, and the set screw holds the antenna tube. So that's pretty much it. We'll leave this off to the side for now. And I'm gonna begin with the front end. Well, since I have to install a servo, might as well go ahead and remove these. So let's go ahead and remove those two on the top. Now, luckily, removing and installing the servo is not that difficult on this particular vehicle, which is a good thing. Some other vehicles can be a little more complex. Some vehicles can be easier, some can be a little more challenging. I think one of the most challenging servos when it comes to this scale, now I'm talking about short course as well as drag cars since they're based on the same platform, is when you go to four-wheel drive. The Traxxas four-wheel drive servo, oh, that one's a pain. It's not that difficult, it's just annoying. One of the easiest ones, I think Techno is probably one of the easiest ones. Yeah, probably, that's probably one of the easiest. All right, now keep in mind, long screw, short screw. One of the things I do like about this car is the aluminum chassis. So this chassis is very nice. DR10 has a plastic tub. It's not bad, right? It works. Oh, did I miss something? Let's see. Oh, I removed the wrong ones, I apologize. So these short ones, these stay, it's these back ones. So it's these four in the back. These front ones go to these side skirts. Now, a thing to note on these is there is a size difference. So you do have these shorter ones in the rear, and you get these longer ones in the front. So keep that in mind. Now, those very front ones that I removed, those are even shorter if you compare them. So that's something else to keep in mind. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and install these because there's no point in me having them off. All right, so now we're gonna deal with the front end. Now, the front end is actually pretty straightforward. You have these two screws, 1, 2, and then this one here in the middle, 3. So that middle screw goes right in here. You can't really see because everything's black, but you remove those 3, and that will allow this to move up. Let's go ahead and remove those. So we'll put these from the servo. I'll place them this way. If you have an electric screwdriver, you can use that. Just be careful with the amount of torque that you apply. And I'm not going to tear everything down. Some of the things I'm just going to point. For example, the steering. Now you do not have a servo saver with it built into the horn, such as at Traxxas. Traxxas generally has, on their base models, they have the servo saver built into the horn. Higher end models, it's built into their steering bell crank. But, all right, so those have been removed. So at this point, now I can go ahead and remove the bumper. So it'll be these two down at the bottom. And those previous 3 screws that I removed, those are all the same size, so I'm not worried about mixing them. Now the front bumper is actually one thing that the Drag Slash has that is much nicer than the Losi 22 or the DR10. All right. There's really no way you can confuse these 2 screws because they're just massively long. They're probably 30 millimeters. All right, that's it. So we have the screws there, and then you would just remove these 2. Now I'm not going to remove those 2. It's mainly, well, I guess I'm going to have to because this has to pull back. All right. There we go. So it pulls forward. So this here, this hooks. That's what I was trying to. There we go. So this hooks in there, so you just have to pull forward and then up. Plastic is flexible enough. So that is it. This would come up just like this, and this bumper is now free. Now from here, this, I'm not going to remove it, but if you remove these 4 screws, sorry, those 2 screws, 1, 2, this will remove the bulkhead. So if you ever break this bulkhead, remove these 2 screws, open this up, remove this. It'll be easier if you just take the whole bumper off. So there we go, it's focused. And then the bulkhead will come out. Now I'm not going to remove the bulkhead. I don't need to. Now in order to remove the arms, I'm going to go ahead and show you. I'll go ahead and do it. Now with the bumper on, you can do it, but I'll be honest, it kind of gets in the way. This is a 1.5, so no longer 2. And this little screw that's here, this is just a retaining screw. So it's just it's a regular button screw, but it's made to retain the pin. So it's not holding anything except for the pin. That way the hinge pin doesn't slide forward. So once this is removed, this can slide forward. So I can go behind here with my 1.5 and then just push the pin out, and then that is it. So once the pin is out, the arm is now free, as you can see. That is it. Again, much easier if you remove this. Now there is a metal link here, so this one ties the 2 together. Keep that on, you need this one. It just gives it extra strength so you don't crack the bulkhead. It's simple, so say you take a hit here, that's a brace that holds those pins together so they don't open up and tear through the plastic bulkhead. Now they do make some different materials. I believe they make a brass one, probably they should. for added weight. I remember there was a guy that had I think it was a steel brace. But brass, if you want to add some weight, that works. That's pretty much it. Once you remove this other one, that brace will come off. So you need to remove both in order to remove that brace. That brace will just pop up. That's it. So we're going to go ahead and install this again. So I'm just going to set the pin in the hole. I'm just going to slide it through. And one of the things I have to mention is for an RTR, this is very, very nice. Everything is so free in the suspension. I don't like the shocks though. I don't like the way they're tuned. But as far as the hinges, they are great. They're right on point. All right. Let's go ahead and install. And this one, do not torque it. Actually, it just needs to sit there. You don't over tighten this one. So it just needs to sit there. And I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but it actually just grabs a small amount of the pin. If you can see there, just the edge, just barely. And that's all it needs really to keep this from backing out. Well, that is it. So that's how you would remove that. Now, if for some reason you're replacing the shock tower on these, you would remove these two screws. So this one here, let me get it on camera. So 1, 2, this one you can't really see. There we go. So those two. 1, 2, remove those two, and then on the other side, you have matching ones, 1, 2. And then once you remove those, short course is going to be different. You're not going to have these two up here. No, wait, hold on. Yes, you do. It's a similar body mounting system. I can't remember, but just look for those for the body mounts. I think they're here, just the body mounts differently. I think it mounts back here. I don't remember. Actually, I have one somewhere. Oh, there it is. But that one's still boxed up. That's somebody else's. All right. And then just use the nut driver here. Use a 2mm driver in the back, and that'll remove the shocks, and everything will be good. So right now, let's just go ahead and reassemble this. So if we had removed those screws, we'll put them back on. Now I have to go back over here. You do the bulkhead screws, and remember it's the back two. Then after that, you want to drive this in and then clip it on. See, it slides right in. Drop the long screws. And these are actually on there quite tight because you're going into plastic and then more plastic. Something that you can do whenever you're threading screws through so much plastic, I'm not doing it, I should. Well, I don't have to, because these are pre-threaded, that's fine. But if you add a little bit of grease, it helps it out. So especially if you're building a kit, but remember, you're only adding a little bit of grease, and it's whenever you're threading onto plastic, not metal. For that, you want thread lock. Right, here we go. Do not over tighten these. Snug is all you need. You can ruin the threads and that'll ruin the plastic. All right, so at this point we have the other 3 screws, and that would normally finish this whole top section. And I'm gonna go to the ends of the arms. I'll finish threading that one in a bit. And we just need the center. All right, let's pretend we put those 4 screws on there. Everything's good to go. So now you would use a 5mm driver. So let's say you want to remove the shock, and it's the same front and rear. So you're going to use a 2mm driver. Now, something else that you could do is you could use, if you have a 5mm wrench, stick that wrench in there. There's a secondary nut right in here. So this one's out. So the silver one goes at the end. This will just pop out. But now you have these plastic little cones, right? And the shock actually sits right in here. Camera's not focusing. Let's see. Well, anyway, it sits in there. This slides right on through, so if these get damaged, you want to replace these like little barrels. And then there's another nut in here. So this nut helps the screw prevent it from backing out. So have that one there, use the nut driver. Actually, this one's barely long enough. This was somewhat loose. There we go. Oh, that's why I had a little piece of paper. Never mind, it's plenty long. Probably installing a nut, and that's why I placed that in there. Just forgot. All right. Now, for the bottom, it's just a screw. That's it. And on both, it's the same thing. So you do have different mounting positions. You have 3 mounting positions front, 3 mounting positions rear, depending on how you want to set it up. Now, really quick, if you move these out, because of the distance, well, I'll show you once we get there. It's not just going to change the angle, it's also going to change the position. So that's something you want to consider. Now in the front, you want some nice droop when you take off. Rear, that's going to be up to you. To be honest, it depends on how much power you're running and how good you're at modulating the throttle. Some ESCs do most of the work for you now. All right, so let's go ahead and remove the shock. So out of the box, this one comes in the center hole for the front. Now, let's see if I can hold it this way, just so I can be on camera. There we go. And here's the shock. Just comes out like that. So these are actually nice. They're a nice design. So you can bleed the shock through here through the top, which is great. Out of the box, yeah, I don't like them at all. So go ahead and open it up. You do have these preloads. Now you're going to adjust the preloads later. I'm gonna go ahead and remove them. Now, these preloads, they just clip on and clip off. That's it. So if you want softer, you can take them off, but your car's gonna sit lower, maybe, depending on the weight. If you want them stiffer, you can add some preloads, or you can get a softer spring, harder spring, softer or stiffer spring. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and push this down. Actually, don't have to. I'm just gonna remove this. That way I don't have to deal with the spring right now. So pulling the spring this way, then hold it, and then just pull this up and out. So I'll set that there. I can set the spring here. If you remove this, first of all, oil's gonna start coming out the back, but you have seals that are in there. Oil's not. So I could use the pliers, but anyway. If this starts leaking down here, there's seals that go in there, so you would remove this, and then this would come out. Now, one of the things that you're gonna have to do is either remove the link, this here, at which point you're gonna need some shock pliers to hold this, or you can seriously use a rag or a blue towel and then use some pliers and hold it. You just don't want to damage the finish. Keep that in mind. You can remove this, just twist left to remove, right to install, and then you can just slide then the old seal's out, new seal's in. If you want to replace the oil, it's just the top. So let's go ahead and grab this. One of the things that you will notice is these little marks. This is where you would use a wrench. Now, I don't have the correct size wrench, so I'm just going to use the pliers. I do not recommend that you use pliers usually, but this takes so little force, so I'm not really going to mark this or damage it, so it's fine. So see, that's what it looks like. Everything's good. And there we go. Oh, before I do, well, too late, but let's see. There's actually a ton of air in there. This is probably very light oil or very little oil. And let's go ahead and pop this open and see. Well, very little oil, so it doesn't have much. That's why it does that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do all of the shocks off camera. One of the things when you're threading these is set the cap, go left, and then once it sits, then go right. So you'll generally feel a little click. But yeah, that's the reason why there's a huge gap of air in here for these. But anyway, you would fill them up, cap these up, well, remove this, cap it, you fill these up with oil, move the piston up and down just to remove air bubbles. Once you do that, top it off, put the cap on with the screw off, and then put the screw on, do it again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then after that, remove the screw lightly and then push this slowly up and then close it. Just keep a rag because you're gonna get some oil. But right now we're just going to reassemble it. So first thing, make sure you keep this collar on. Now this looks like a little hat. Camera's not focusing. Well, that's a little better. So this long part, that goes up, and the reason why is because this little hat portion goes inside the spring and it holds in. So that's where the spring mounts. It'll just do this, pull back, do this. Now, light oil in the front is a good idea, mainly because you want your suspension to be reactive. So as soon as you take off, you want those arms to drop so that you can still have some of that steering. Now, ideally, when you take off, if you want all the power, all the weight in the rear wheels, the car will lift, just barely lift off the front wheels, barely. And then take off. So the front wheels will still be close to the ground. They will barely take off, ideally. A lot of people love riding on the sway bar. If you're riding on the sway bar, now there's weight on the sway bar. That weight is no longer on the rear wheels. So my recommendation is learn to take off and drive so that the car barely lifts off the front or is barely riding on the front wheels instead of hitting the sway bar. Even if you're lightly riding the sway bar. Now, if you're riding all 6, so that 2 wheels on the sway bar, the rear wheels, and the front wheels, that's even less weight on those rear wheels. I see some people do that too. Again, just work on tuning the car, work on driving. Now the DR10, if you're just looking something nice out of the box, DR10, oh, that thing's so nice, just out of the box. I'm not saying it's the best, I'm not saying you're gonna win competitions with it out of the box, but just for RTR, it's such a nice car. All right, so that is the shock. Now, the links. I'm just gonna show you how the links work. The links, you just pop these off. Now, do you need to pop them off? Yes, why? Because these do not have a hole. Some links on some vehicles, Associated for example, generally has a hole here, so you can remove the ball stud from it. These you cannot. So all you would do is you can grab a wrench, stick it in here, or you can grab pliers, and then you just twist. So you just grab it here on the flats part, and then you just twist off, and that's it. Notice that the ball studs have, that's how you install them. They have that keyed for 2 millimeters, so 2 millimeter Allen. Now in order to install them again, just lay it on top and then you can use your hands. Depending on the surface, you may want to use pliers because you may not want to apply too much pressure, or it'll just be a pain on your fingers. But all the links work that way. This one over here, just move the steering off to the side. So let me show you. Just like this, and then you can remove them and install them, and then move it to the other side, and then to the other side. Now, something to keep in mind. This is not a short course. This is not made for bashing. If you take hard hits here, sometimes what you can damage is you can damage this hub, this carrier right in here. So you can damage this, and then that's a pain because you have to remove everything. So let's just say you do damage it. Well, there's going to be, there it is, on top, there's going to be this little screw, and it's the same concept as the arms. You just remove that little tiny screw, and the pin will just push out. Let me go ahead and show you. So it's a 1.5. Those retaining screws tend to be 1.5. So don't lose it. There it is. And then once that happens, the pin may or may not slide on its own. If it doesn't, that's fine. Just grab your 1.5 millimeter driver, push it through. There's the pin. Once you remove this pin, this comes out. And it's the same exact thing right here. You see that screw? You remove that one, push the pin through, and this will come out. So then to install it, put the pin through. Once you put the pin through, put the screw. Do not over tighten this. Now really quick, this pin can only go in through one direction, which is the front. So all of these, that goes through the front, this one goes through the top. Why? So that the set screws here and you don't lose it through the bottom or start damaging it. The rear, there's not enough space. If you can put the pin through the rear, replace your arm, because that means that hole's too big, so your pin's gonna be backing out. Those are things to keep in mind. Now, your bearings. So if you look at this, you have bearings inside. So that's actually, see, that's the spindle. Can't really see it spinning, well, or kind of, sort of, because it's black, but that's the spindle. So all you do with these is you just stick a driver and this will pop out. Once this pops out, there's gonna be a pin, much smaller pin, it's gonna go through there. Just remove that, and then this you push out. You're gonna have then you can remove the bearings. So for this, I should have had a screwdriver on hand. Actually, I have one in a bin. There we go. So just stick it inside and remove. Now, a quick little thing when you're removing these. If you look at this hex, the pin will always be going through angle to angle. So if you accidentally stick the driver here and it goes to, and you're probably gonna hit the pin, so you'll be fine, but you're gonna grab very little material. So just go to the next one so you can stick your driver a little farther in, and that's it. So just stick it on one side, then go to the complete opposite, stick it again, and then just twist, it'll pop out. Because the pin actually locks into this. There is no need to replace the front ones with aluminum. The rears, I would recommend aluminum. But the fronts, there's no torque to the wheels. That's why. Well, there's nothing moving the wheels. The wheels are just being pushed. Once you have this, there is the pin, and there's generally going to be, on many vehicles, not this one, there's generally going to be a little shim to protect the bearing from the pin, usually on the traction wheels. So we'll see once we get to the rear. But this pin just comes out. You can always pull it with pliers as well, and this will just slide out. So there goes the spindle. Now you have two small ball bearings. You may be able to see a little gap in here. In there, there's a little black gap. Let's see. Let me just go ahead and remove one. So I just used a driver and I pushed in the bearing. So here is that little gap that I was talking about. which is a shim that goes between the two bearings. So you're just going in between and you're just pushing the edge of the bearing. So I could have done that one first or the other one, it doesn't matter. This one's really easy, you just push anywhere, but at this point just grab a larger driver and push. You could even use the spindle itself, just use the flat side and do that, but I'm not going to. So bearing, press in, press that one, set that one. You can put the spindle to use as a guide. Now when you're pressing the bearings in, make sure they're flat. If they're at an angle, so here, I'm gonna exaggerate this. If it were like this and you try pushing it in, you're gonna damage the plastic and it's not really gonna go in. But if you set it flat, they generally go in pretty smooth. Right, now to install, bearings are there, spindle is there, there's the pin. Just like that, make sure it's even. And there's the hex. And again, make sure you line up those marks with the pin. And that's it. Now we can go ahead and install this right in here. Remember, the pin goes top to bottom. And that's it. Now, notice this. This is something I want to point out. See the, well, the camera can't really get it there, but you can get an idea for the potential droop. Let's go ahead and do this. That's much better. Unfortunately, they don't make shocks that go longer, so this is, you're pretty much stuck with this droop, which is something that I like better about the DR10, because the DR10 just has better front suspension. This one is not bad. It's probably better than the Slash, Drag Slash I should say. Drag Slash by far is the worst. The only thing the Drag Slash really has going for it is the easy access to the diff, the front bumper, and the really cool body. Oh, and the Mickey Thompson rear wheels. Now, this one does come with Mickey Thompsons, but the Drag Slash, they're wider. They're much wider, at least half a centimeter probably. But these are nice as well. All right, we're almost finished with the front. I'm just gonna reinstall that shock. So again, make sure that nut is on tight, not too tight though. Don't over tighten these. And this will just slide on. Once it slides on, go ahead and grab the other nut, just set it in. Once it's set, and if this is tight, you don't need that driver over here. You can just tighten it here. That one was loose as well, out of the box. This is one of the reasons why I don't really like RTRs. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, right? You take it out of the box, slap some batteries on and take off. But I prefer kits and building them because you can check everything. Or you can get an RTR, just take it all apart and rebuild it. All right, here we go. Now, I'll go ahead and slide this in. Sometimes what will happen is that little barrel in the bottom will sort of twist, and that's why you won't be able to get it in. But once you line it up, it'll just slide right in. So now the question is, right, inner position. Maybe I'll do this through here. So inner, mid, or out. The outer position, so let me go ahead and line this up. I'll put the screw just to hold it. The outer position will give you just slightly more droop because of the shock line, slightly more. So depending on how your car is sitting, you can go all the way to the out. Because your shock is also angle out, it'll also soften it. It'll make it seem like it's softer than it really is. But that's really the position I would keep it on this car, assuming the spring is soft enough. So go ahead and do this, and then I'll swap the other one as well. You may want to remove a preload because you want the car to sit low in the front. You don't want to have it too high or else it'll just want to bounce up on the wheelie bar. I mean, with enough traction, they all will. I may end up removing the wheelie bar, not putting it on, and the reason why is my intention is putting a 13.5, so doing a stock setup on this thing. That's the reason why. Now, I will be honest, out of the RTRs, DR10 is my favorite. This one's pretty cool too. And there we go. Go ahead and switch that one out. Like I said, the only reason why I'm doing this is for the droop. I may change my mind once I put the body, battery, everything in if it sits too high, but I'm gonna work with the preloads first. But one of the things with the preloads are you may still need them, not necessarily to preload, but because the spring may not be long enough. And the problem is if the spring's not long enough, let me remove these. When it compresses and then decompresses, the spring may actually fall off the spring mount on the bottom. Now, if we do this, oh, actually this works. This spring is perfect. Well, perfect in length. I'm not saying it's... So one of the things, this having oil like this is gonna may cause the car to bounce. So if it comes off and then it hits, may cause it to bounce. So that's something to keep in mind. But based on what I'm seeing, I'm gonna remove the preloads. There's no need for them. There we go. All right, good stuff. And that's it for the front. So now, at this point, we can go on over to the rear. All right, so wheelie bar, I'm gonna go ahead and remove it, and I'm just gonna leave it off. Like I said, putting a 13.5 in here. So you're gonna need that 5mm nut driver, so that'll go here. And you have 1, 2 screws. This moves the link. Now, quick note before I remove this. You can adjust this, you can do long increments, so large increments by moving the hole up or down, but then you can fine tune the height by turning the turnbuckle. So that's something else. So this does have a turnbuckle. Something else that you may see people do is some people will actually put a damper, and the damper will just ease the shock if this thing just hits the sway bar. And the reason why you may want to do that is if you're an individual that rides the rear a lot, what will happen is as soon as this thing goes, let's just say you take off, if you hit the wheelie bar, I think I said sway bar, when you hit the wheelie bar too hard, it'll actually bounce off the traction tires and onto the wheelie bar, and that's not good at all. So keep that in mind. That's why some people will have a damper. My DR10, to be honest, it never even goes on the wheelie bar the way it's set up. And that one's stock electronics, that particular one. I may, to be honest, just go all DR10. But these are nice. I mean, the quality's nice on these cars. So if you have one, go ahead and keep it. Now, short course, the bumper would fit back here. Actually, the sway bar goes here, I believe. Now, even if I remove the wheelie bar, this screw has to go through. So I'm still gonna have to use this screw. Now this one I'm gonna leave because I'm just removing everything. But I am gonna remove the bottom one. So really it's just 2 screws that I'm gonna be removing. I'm just using my hand. And that's it. So now I can use driver here. Now the nice thing is this nut falls in that pocket, so that pocket is a hex pocket, which the camera's not getting. So you don't have to worry about using a driver. Yeah, these screws are so long. It's just a pain because it threads pretty much the entire way. All right, that's good enough. All right, so I still left the screw in there. But anyway, this will just pop out now. And just be careful because this nut will fall off. So make sure you keep track of it. Now, I'll go ahead and put this in here. Well, no, because that threads on. Now this one, so one of the things that I would recommend is if you run this, run a reamer through this because there shouldn't be any threads here. This, well, I guess you could because it's fixed. So it's up to you. I would just leave it there. But anyway, that's it. So that is now off. So now that it's off, we can go ahead and work on everything else. Now, in order to remove, let's just say you need to remove this battery tray here. Well, you use the bottom screws, so you have these four. You also have these over here. And then you're gonna have to remove the transmission to access, well, if you just remove these two here, there's two screws right in there. The camera's not gonna pick it up. So these two screws. And then you can detach this section either from the tower and then the shocks. This will come out with the shock tower. If you need to replace the shock tower, well, unfortunately, you're gonna have to remove all of that. So this comes out and then you can replace that. Now the transmission, I am going to pull the transmission from this vehicle. So the screws that I'm gonna be removing, I'm gonna be removing these front ones to release this. So it's a similar procedure to removing the shock tower. Very similar. So that's one. Two. All right, so that was those two. So that'll free this link right here. Now I'm gonna go into those inside screws that I was referring to. Unfortunately, this gap is too small for me to really stick my thumb in there. There we go. So those are the inside screws. So keep them separate because they are different lengths. There we go. All right, so now those two screws down there are removed. So now I can go down here, and down here, I'm gonna go ahead and remove these and these. I'm trying to see, no, I don't need to remove those. So these two screws, these are for the C block. So you have an A, B, right? A block, B block, C block, D block. So these are the blocks that hold the pins. So I'm gonna leave those, just gonna remove the rest. So the other 6 screws. These screws back here are much longer, so make sure you don't confuse them. They're about twice the length. So I'll be removing the transmission. All right, so those 5 are removed. I removed those, and then those 2 right in there. Okay, so be careful when you do that. I was actually expecting it to be a little tighter than it was. Now this section, this just keys in here, so that goes in there. This pin just flew out, but that's fine, no big deal. This other part, so this is the D block, so that's what they look like. All right, so we'll go ahead and set that right off to the side. Now, let's just say you were replacing the arms. If you were replacing the arms, well, you would remove this because this is what's holding the pins in. So you're gonna have to remove, you will have to remove these in order to remove this so that you have access to the arms. So then the arms will just slide. So that applies also to this little section. So I have removed the transmission, but before I go into tearing down the transmission, I'm just going to explain how this works. So this actually works just like the front. You have a pin here, you have the pin, and then you have a little screw, that retaining screw. Now here, they are in the back. You remove that, and then this pin pushes out the back. And then this would slide out. Now, if you stick your driver in here, pop this out, there's going to be a retaining pin, just like the front had. Then you can take this, so if you bend these, you really need to replace them or else your car will wobble, it'll start bouncing. This usually happens when you take a hard side impact or you tumble and roll. Sometimes these will actually be compressed all the way in. They will hit inside of these cups, and then it'll bend them and warp them. Difficult to do, but it does happen, so keep that in mind. I should remove this so I can show you how these work. All right. Now these, I do recommend you get aluminum ones for these, because what will end up happening, I'll show you in a bit. Actually, I don't have one of the damaged ones.
sometimes people will hear a buzzing sound or a whining sound. I'm gonna try to imitate the sound. And the vehicle will want to move forward, but it will either move forward really slowly or it just won't move forward. And a lot of people jump to the conclusion that it might be transmission and they start buying transmission parts, when in reality the only thing that happened is because you're running plastic hexes, these probably started wearing, so they rounded, and then it starts rounding the hex inside of the wheel. So what's going on is that this thing is just spinning inside of the wheel. And it doesn't matter how much you torque it, once this is rounded and this is rounded, you're gonna need a new wheel and a new hex, and your car is never going to run properly if you do not replace them. So keep that in mind. Now, these are very easy to assemble and disassemble. So let me go ahead and place this here. There's a pin right there. And the camera is not focusing. There it is. You can just use a pick. 1.5 is too big to push that one out. But if you use a pick, body clip, well, this is a larger body clip, paper clip, right, you just push that thing through, just like that. And then this will slide out, this comes out. See, this is just a little barrel inside, just like this. Now, one of the things to note is this is just oiled out of the factory. It does not have grease. I'm gonna try it out like this, but to be honest, I would put some graphite grease. Hoodie, surprisingly. At first I didn't like the grease because of the way it felt, but it actually runs very good. So it's pretty good running grease. I mean, it doesn't have to be Hoodie. I just happen to have some because of the X-ray. All right, but that's it. So that was the disassembly and assembly. You want to service these often. So I can go ahead and just install this now. Again, you have the bearings. You have larger bearing on the inside, smaller bearing on the outside. Just driver, just like the front ones. Push one out, then push the other one. The rear bearing is what holds that pin in there from backing out. Now these 22s, or at least this drag car, does not have shims here, but that's probably because those bearings are actually a really good size compared to the Traxxas. Oh, I think they might be the same size. I don't know why they look more robust though. Maybe they are different. That's something I'm gonna have to look up later. Put in the comments below just in case I forget to look it up and make a note. All right, so that's lined up. That is inside. Perfect. Now the links, the same thing to remove them. Shocks, same as the front. And then this, we'll worry about later. Do not install the arm yet until the transmission is ready to go in. The reason why is once you put the arm in, if you put in the transmission, it can be a little more challenging to actually stick these in properly. One of the differences between the rear shocks is out of the factory, these have limiters. Those limiters are actually a good idea so that the chassis doesn't scrape. Keep in mind that if you're racing by the rules, you cannot lock the rear suspension. It has to function as intended by the manufacturer, which means the arms have to still be able to go up and down. So again, that's something to keep in mind when it comes to it. Now we have the transmission, so I really want to get into this. Now, if this were still installed in the vehicle, what you would have to do is remove this wheel, so remove the right wheel. Then you take this screw and this screw out. Now, if you're just adjusting the slipper clutch, you can access it through here. Right? And then just put the car on the ground so that the wheels are getting traction, and then you can spin this. If not, if you lift it up, then you're just gonna spin that, and that's just gonna make your wheel spin. And you're not really gonna tighten it or loosen it for that matter, unless it's already really loose, at which point that is bad. Now, a little recommendation, slipper clutches. Run the slipper clutch while you're getting used to the vehicle. If you're just starting, run the slipper clutch. Why? Because the slipper will actually take some of the impact from the force if you go full throttle right ahead. Now, once you have a little more experience and you're used to modulating the throttle, go ahead and lock this. Just get a locker. I mean, don't even bother locking this in. I mean, you could, but it'll start backing out and coming loose. guess you could use 2 nuts. If you use 2 nuts, you know, they'll lock each other in. But the slipper clutch is a very good idea because it will slip a little, so it'll absorb some of that initial impact. The only thing is these will start backing out eventually, and then you'll start burning up the slipper. So you constantly have to be adjusting it. But this is just for you to start learning how much throttle to give the car. Once you're used to it, just get a locker, lock this thing out, and then keep practicing on the throttle. Again, there are ESCs that do all the work for you, so you can just, you know, like the Macklin, 7 settings, and you can just go full throttle, and then the ESC just does everything for you. RX-8 has some pretty cool functions. I may do a video on my RX-8, but anyway, here we go. So in order to remove this slipper, I guess I could do it. That's a 5. Here's a 5. Just grab the gear, and that's it. And this will come out. Now the order here is important. So you have that little metal hat. Spring goes in it. That goes on top. You're gonna get the friction disc. Well, this little plate. Oh, it is a friction disc. And see how that's keyed? That's the reason why. And then this is the friction pad, which is very different than associated pads. Associated pads are all smooth. These have texture to them. Now these are glued onto the gear, so if you destroy a spur, you're gonna have to get new pads. Sometimes you can remove these carefully and they'll have enough adhesive to adhere to the new one. Sometimes they do. So we'll go ahead and do that. This will go here. We'll place the nut over here, and we'll go ahead and take this. Now, keep in mind, these two are identical. So if you, and then this color, this is the way it goes. So this, there's a rounded side and there's a flatter side. The flatter side is the one that goes in contact with the pad. Now, once you do this again, we're working on this. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these top screws just to get this out of the way so I have only the transmission. But this would be your motor mount right in here. Let's go ahead and get the top off. Now, one of the nice things about these body mounts is they go really far back, and the reason why is, there we go. When the body mounts are as close to the corners of the body as possible, it gives the body of the car more stability, especially when you're running at higher speeds because of the wind, so it helps to stabilize it. Whereas, let's just hypothetically speaking, let's just say there was just only one body mount and it was right in the middle of the car, so right through the roof. That body would be so flexible. It would just be hitting the wheels, just flapping up and down. So that's the reason why body mounts are generally toward the front and toward the rear. And that's why instead of just having one in the front, one in the rear, there's two. So the farther out the body mounts are, the better, especially with these massive bodies for these drag cars. Now, in order to adjust the body mounts, I should say, this just comes out. So that's not picking it up. Well, you just remove this screw and you can shift this up and down and then stick it on here. And that's it. That's all you do. All right, so I've gone ahead and removed these. I'm actually gonna put them in there. Well, I'll just put them right front so I don't lose track of them. And now at this point, I can go ahead and remove these two, and these two will drop this section, so this will just slide out. So this is the motor guard. Some people replace these with aluminum ones. That's fine. I mean, you can just remove this. If you're not running a wheelie bar, remove this and then just put a heatsink with a fan You don't need a fan necessarily. Keep in mind that you're only going to be running the car for, say, 3 seconds. Well, depends on the system that you're running. But let's say about 3, no more than 4 seconds. But then again, 4 seconds is quite a lot in drag racing. Alright, and then this would just slide off. So if this were completely attached to the vehicle, you would just remove those 4 screws, and this would just come out. That's something to keep in mind. Alright, here's the transmission. So in order to remove this, we need to remove, there's a screw right in here, so let's go ahead and remove these. So one of the nice things about this plate here is that it uses 4 mounting points instead of 3. And the reason why I say nice is because the gearbox is actually quite small, but you have more mounting points as opposed to 3. 3 mounting points is very common. If I recall correctly, DR10 has 3 mounting points. The Drag Slash has 3 mounting points. This one has a 4th one. Does it make a big difference? Maybe, maybe not. Keep in mind that many of those transmissions with 3 points, people have been putting 4, 5, 6S systems on there, and these hold on very well. It's generally the gears that will get destroyed, mainly on the non-272R or the Magnum, because that one has full metal gears. DR10 comes with plastic gears. They do the job, they're great for stock, but if you're running modified power, you really want those metal gears. I mean, Team Associate just in general, if you've ever driven their buggies, one of the first things that always goes out is that idler gear. Great vehicles though, but idler gear. That's the Achilles heel. Achilles heel. All right, there we go. So 1, 2, 3, those are the same size. The long one is the one that holds this section right here. Let's go ahead and remove it. Oh man, this just threads all the way through. Yep. Well, there we go. I don't have to actually remove it. So if I wanted to remove this completely, you just keep going, but this thing just threads all the way through. So it's threaded all the way, but I'm just gonna leave this on here. So if you do end up replacing this for whatever reason, you know, maybe use the wrong screws, so you've already destroyed this, so you can't really mesh the motor properly, that's the way to go. So that's something to keep in mind. If you use screws that are not the correct screws, they'll start milling themselves inside, and then it'll be difficult if you replace gears and you have to move the motor back and forth to actually make it fit properly. But this is it. This is the gearbox. So the gearbox is here. Now note, this is a 3-gear system, 1, 2, 3. Usually rear motor systems are going to be 3 gears, and that's just because of the way they apply the force. So if you look at this, this sits this way in the car. The motor would be over here. Now, in order for this to spin this way, this gear has to spin that way, which means that this spins this way. So in order for this to spin this way, that means that the rotor has to spin the opposite direction, which means that if the rotor is spinning backwards, right, so in reverse, so the rotor is spinning this way, that means that the stator wants to move forward. So stator, rotor. So if this is the rotor's spinning that way. Which, if you think about it, if you were to hold the rotor, that means the can would go this way. So the reason why they generally use 3-gear transmissions is so that as soon as you accelerate, the stator applies a force down on the chassis to give you traction. And that's the reason why. If you had a 4-gear transmission on a rear setup, it would actually take traction off because it would want to spin this way, so it would want to lift the vehicle up. Now, keep that in mind. That's why mid-motor vehicles, they generally run a 4-gear for the same reason. So instead of the stator going forward, now the stator is going back because it's back here. So again, it's putting that force down into the rear tires. That's the reason. Once we remove everything, we just have 1, 2, 3, these 3 screws, and that'll open up the transmission. Now the DR10, actually, it's mostly stock, but I'm actually running 100 weight oil in the differential. And if you've seen some of those other videos, it's so easy to just drive. Keep in mind, the DR10 I'm referring to is the stock one, out of the, well, it's not quite out of the box now because it has a sway bar. But it's very easy to drive. So again, it depends. If you're just messing around, just leave it stock. Plan on doing competition, then you're gonna consider some other things. Maybe you wanna do stock racing, right? 13.5. All right, so all 3 screws luckily are the same size, but once you remove those, this will just pop open. So remove this side, the side with the shaft, and that is it. So if you see this transmission, this is a very nice transmission. It is all metal gears. So there's plus and minuses to each vehicle. A major plus here is the metal gears. So this one can handle the power. Now it is greased up. That's very thin grease. Actually, this is pretty smooth, very smooth. Now this is 2-piece. If you have the drag slash, this is going to be 1 piece. So that's actually very nice. But the pin is, this is a massive pin. There's an E-clip. I hate E-clips. But there's a massive pin right in there, so you're not going to break it like you would. There we go, focusing, perfect. Like you would the roll pin on the regular Traxxas 272. The 272 is a horrible transmission for drag racing. But the 272R, which is the one on the drag slash, that one, this is 1 piece, everything else is metal. Now, the actual differential, this is tunable. Just remove these 4 screws and you will access the diff. Now, on the DR10, as well as the drag slash, unless they changed something recently, which is possible, the differentials are just filled with grease, so it's just black grease. This one, man, there's something really heavy in here because this one's going to be some really heavy weight. The way it feels, it almost feels like it might be like 2 million. That does like 20 million. It's not even 1 million. This is 20 million. This is really heavy. So you're not supposed to lock the differentials, but they went with really heavy. So if we open this up, it's almost going to look like putty. Oh yeah, this is heavy as can be. So if you look at how heavy this thing is, this is really heavy oil. See? So this here, maybe this is 2 million. I mean, it's so heavy, it has to be 1 million or 2. It feels too heavy for 1 million. So this might be 2 million. Something I have to look up and then let you know, or you can put in the comments if you already know, or if I forget to put it in the description, just, you know, what weight oil. This is very, very heavy. But one of the nice things is this one does have the better differential. It has the metal components, metal gears. I like the way this cups over. So this 22 is, I would say, this is the best differential. And again, they all have their pros and cons. This 22 has some very good pros compared, for example, to the DR10. But the DR10 has some pros compared to this as well. this. Let's see. Now the DR10M, M for mid motor, that one has an all metal gear transmission. It's a very nice transmission, but it's mid motor, so really it's unfair to compare it with this one. One different price point, that's just a roller you have to build. Well, this is a roller, but point is it's a mid motor, so it's going to be a completely different beast. Plus, keep in mind there's a huge price difference. $370 for that one, carbon chassis, versus this one is $240. Actually, I can't remember what the price is on this one. Sometimes they're on sale though, just like the DR10. DR10 you can get the roller sometimes for $170. Here we go. Which I would not pay more than $170 for the DR10 roller, even though I really like the DR10. The reason why is because of the upgrade parts, like the metal differential, all that stuff. That's why. Now, this is steel. This is actually quite heavy. Now, the DR10, you can get an aluminum differential, which is lighter. So the lighter, the better. This is heavy. That's a con. But the gears are metal. Versus DR10, they are plastic. So these are going to last longer. Well, if you start putting power through it. All right, so now to close everything up, the bearings, you just pop them out, just like you would on the other vehicles. Keep in mind that one there, don't lose that one inside. But here we go. So this is actually a very good choice. Again, we all have our preferences. I still prefer the DR10, still my choice, but if you have one of these, it's still pretty good. Still hold at the, so if I'll do a video later on explaining this stuff. Okay, so really quick, when you're closing this up, get this close, but don't close it completely, because you want to make sure that the other ones are close. And the reason why is if you tighten one of these on the edges first, it'll cause the case to open on the opposite side. So if I were to tighten this one fully, it's going to cause the case to open here. If I tighten this one fully, it's going to cause the case to open here. So you don't want to flex it that way. Yes. So those are just some notes. So it's really heavy oil. So little recommendation, and I know these are hard to access. That's one of the advantages of the drag slash, how easy it is to access the diff. But start with light oil and then build your way up. Don't start with heavy oil and then go down. And the reason why is because it can be difficult to get rid of that heavier oil. Just cleaning it is a pain. All right, here we go. So now this will go here. So 1, 2, 3 screws. Oops. And all right, that's great. All right, so because I did it this way, there we go. It's a lot easier if you just remove the extra parts. All right, so this will go here, and I'll just start moving this one in. Oh, didn't get it. Back it out and try again. There we go. Perfect. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Now the nice thing about all those three models, now I'm talking about really the basic models, so forget about the DR10M, that one's a whole different class. But the nice thing about all of these is the mounting plate is aluminum for all of them. So that will help absorb some of the heat and cool the motor. Right, so I'm not going to tighten this fully until I install some of these. Just makes it easier if you set the screws in and then go through and start tightening things up. So now I'm going to start driving them in. Alright, so this is all set. I'm going to go ahead and wipe my hands. So they use a lot of oil instead of grease, and it just gets all over your hands. So let me just wipe off a little. That's much better. Alright, so we have this. Now we can go ahead and install. Alright, so we're going to grab this. Let's see. So go here, go ahead and grab these two. Where did I place the driver? So here we go. Let's only cover this up with the rag I was using to wipe my hands clean. So let me just show you. So this goes right between this and the actual gearbox. So you're just driving it in through there. So it just sandwiches right in between. I'm not going to drive this all the way in until I put the second screw. Drive this one in. Go. All right, now at this point I can go ahead and put the body mount on, but I'm gonna go with this instead. So this little aluminum hat, that'll go in there, and it goes just like that. And this is so this will fit in there. Now remember, there's a rounded side and a flat side. The rounded side goes toward the case, just like this, because the flat side is gonna go against the clutch pad. And again, same thing with this, flat side, rounded side, so the flat side will go here. Keys in, perfect. This will go in here. And you drop it for good luck. 5mm. Gonna drive it all the way in. Back it out. Turn and a half. This is actually a much tighter clutch. All right. So like I said, when you're just learning to drive, release the clutch, just tighten it, loosen it. You may have to get a few of these nylon nuts because they will start backing out eventually, and just replace them. Once you're used to it, just use a locker. All right, good stuff. I'm not gonna put the cover on because I do have to install a motor, but I'm going to move on and attach this here, which uses these. Now before I mount the gearbox onto the chassis of the DR10, something to consider is just mount the motor. It'll be a lot easier. That way the arms aren't in the way. So if you do that, you'll just have more access, might as well. And then you can just install the whole thing. I'm gonna see how far the motor sits. If it extends far enough to where I can solder no problem, I'll do that. If not, then I'm gonna have to just pre-solder everything. Now you can use bullet connectors, 4mm, 5mm, 8mm, that's really big, you don't need those. 4mm is probably fine, 3.5 is probably too small. Keep in mind, if you use bullet connectors, you are going to add resistance, which means that you're gonna lose a little bit of power. And if you watch some of my other videos long ago, this is about a year ago, I did a video where I tested bullet connectors. I think they were 3mm bullet connectors, I can't remember. This was on a touring car using, I think, a 21.5 motor, turn motor. And I think it was a 2 km/h difference just because of the added resistance from the connectors. So keep that in mind. Whenever you use connectors, instead of direct connection, you're using connectors, you are going to create some resistance, you're going to lose a little bit of power. All right, so this is set. I'm going to look at the motor. So the motor will fit in here. I have to go this way, which means that I should, I'll have enough space to solder right on through here. So I can actually install the motor and then I'll deal with the soldering. Everything's already pre-tinned, so we are fine there. So let me just get the proper screws. Right now in the bag, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this out. Quick little note, there's the antenna tube. This is just a waste of plastic. They give you a wrench, it's a little plastic wrench. You're gonna be destroying this one pretty soon, you'll find out. But here we go. So you need to open this up because this is not just where the body clips are. These are thin, at least they're larger. But this is where you're gonna find the little set screw for the antenna tube, but also the washers for the motor. So I'm gonna use 2 of those. And let's see, that is way too long, I think. But we'll see, maybe these, maybe this will be something that'll work. Just see. Barely. All right, so they will work, just seemed a little long. All right, so again, you want the wires to go out that way if you're going to be soldering things. And let's see. There we go. All right, so those 2 holes are lined up. And one of the things that you need is thread lock. Alright, perfect. Should have put the thread lock after I placed the washer. Oh well. Oh, there's still some in there. Alright, let's go ahead and find this again. There they are. May go with some smaller ones. Nope, these work. I think if they were just a little bit shorter, it would have been better. So motor should be able to slide in and out. All right, so at this point, this is where you would want to install your pinion gear. So grab a pinion gear of your choice. Now I'm not seeing a number here, and to be honest, I didn't flip it to see a number, so I'm not sure how many teeth are here. But to start off, a 20 tooth would be fine, and then you can go up from there. But 20 should be fine. I'm actually going to go something a little larger, but one of the things to note is, notice this gear, the pinion is slightly, here we go, slightly smaller than the, well, width-wise, it's thinner than the spur. Notice this one over here, it's slightly larger. You want to go with something like this that's the same size or larger, so that it grabs, makes contact with the most surface area possible. Or else you could end up destroying the spur. So that's a little tip. This is a 24. I'm gonna go with a 23. I do have a different 24, but I figured I'd start with the 23. Probably gonna end up going much higher because of the motor, but I'll figure that out later. And I hope this fits. It does fit. All right, so this one barely fits. So I'm gonna have to get a smaller spur at some point. But here we go. So I just need to line it up first, and I'll worry about the mesh in a bit. All right, that is it. Now, for the mesh. You can grab a piece of copy paper, just slide it through, and then bring these together. Or, yeah, 23 is really the most you're going to get out of here comfortably. Just trying to see if the microphone will pick up the sound. So you can look at the mesh in here and then just listen for it. Now be careful when you tighten, because when you tighten, sometimes these screws will walk and they'll push it closer. Now here's one of the key things. Make sure, see how it grabs, let's see, where's the camera? See how it grabs such a large portion of the teeth? If it doesn't, you're just going to destroy, you're gonna end up destroying the teeth, because it's just gonna grab on the edges, so you're just gonna destroy those completely. Now, if you were to mesh it too tight, here I'm going to loosen this and just give you an example. So if you were to mesh it really tight to where there's no gap, what's going to end up happening is that's going to create a lot of pressure on this. Your motor's going to heat up, and then you may actually end up melting this. So that's something to keep in mind. Now I have to mesh it again. All right, so it's meshed, but one of the things that I noticed is, if you're gonna solder now before you install the transmission. The reason why it's going to be a pain. So it's gonna be up to you if you want to solder and run the wires inside, or if you wanna run them right here through the edge. If you run them off through the edge, it's just gonna be easier for you to swap motors, because then you can just remove the shock. All right, so let's see. So the ESC, so you can just run it over the shock tower if you're mounting the ESC on top. That's what I would do. But solder everything beforehand. It's just gonna make it easier. All right, so everything's soldered on. And the ESC is just gonna go here. Yes, I've quite a bit of excess wire, but that's fine. I mean, this can just bend around. No big deal. It's better to have a little too much than too little. Now, this is where it can get a little bit tricky, but not much really. And it's mainly because of the wires, because this thing just keeps pulling everything out. So you want to, so these are gonna line up and go in there. No big deal. Really, it's these. So these you want to go ahead and place. So you want to put the shafts right in their place. Right in there. That one is there. I can go ahead and set this one. Before I do, let me go ahead. I'll take that one out. Just place it over here. And I'll set this one in. So I'll set this one in, then I'll worry about the other one. So you want to get the transmission close to its position. And let me go ahead and I'll place this one in here. So this just keys in, these two holes, they go toward the rear. So this will just go here, that will go there. And I'll actually mount the, oops, this slipped out of those little holes up here. Let me just line these up. All right, there we go. So it's in there, so it's sat in there and it's sat over here. Now that the arms are free, I can go ahead and line this up. Now, quick note, yes, I did fix this in, so that's in there now. So I could do this and then drop a pin in, but there's a problem, and some of you already got the problem. The problem is the D-block. D-block has to go in there first. So I have to lift this up again. I'll go ahead and lift up. All right, now D-block, this goes. So these go toward the pin, so these are gonna go forward. This goes back, and let's see, this should sit. All right, so these little things, so that's the bottom. That is the bottom. This will go in here. So let me just show you. If you look at this, it's like a puzzle. See that little cutout? Just like that. And the problem is, I need to have the pins in. So let's go ahead and put the shafts. So place the shaft. So there's the shaft. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the pin and run the pin all the way to the C block. All right, that's in the C block. Perfect. Now I'm gonna grab the other one. That's there, and I'm gonna run this to the C block, and that is there. So now I can lift the transmission just a little, just to get the D block over. All right, so the D block is right where the pins are. This is sat. All right, so everything's attached now, except for the transmission. So I'm just gonna hold on to this, lower it a little, nothing falls, and transmission keys in. Should key in here, perfect. So everything is now keyed in. So at this point I can go ahead and install the screws. I'm gonna go ahead and flip it this way, and I'm holding on to it. Now the long ones go through, just in case you forget, they go through the D block. So just put the long ones there. And those are the ones I'm interested in doing first. Let's get the other one started. So I did not drive it all the way in. It's a good portion of the way though. So now I'm going to tighten these. All right. And that is it. So this is all set. I can go ahead and put the cover on here, dust cover. Should have done that beforehand. And I recommend that you run the cover if you are running 48 pitch. And the reason why, well, if you're running plastic gear, plastic spur, if the surface is not dusted, let's just say there's a little bit of sand, something, a little pebble, it might get into your gears and then just destroy them. Well, destroy the spur. It could damage the pinion as well if you're running an aluminum pinion. And that's the reason why. All right, here we go. And now the ESC, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the ESC. Now the ESC is just gonna mount on top, so notice those two screws. You can remove these, you can leave them on. This ESC doesn't need them. If you have a little plate for the ESC, that works as well. If you do it this way, see how it strains the wires? The wires aren't gonna work, so you're gonna have to flip it this way. Now this is just a quick run ESC. It's just a simple, inexpensive ESC, and actually it doesn't fit because of that. It's too long. Just stock would fit. It fits this way though. So I'm gonna go ahead and install it this way, with the wires going this way. If the tires don't hit the wires, I may just use a tie strap. Actually, the wires, they come close, they don't hit though. May just use a tie strap. If I strap them here, right in there, right to here, it'll be perfect. So ESC will just be mounted this way. Let's go ahead and take this off. There we go. Now something else, now this is massive. It doesn't have to be this big because a shorty pack 2S is not going to be that tall. This is probably in case you're running a 3S. I don't think a 4S fits. Maybe it does. I had a 4S somewhere around here. But you could always just drill a little hole there, drill a little hole there, and then just put a tie strap if you really wanted to. Although, I mean, this is not going anywhere. Now, I'm really curious. I know the ESC is mounted with the motor. So this is about 1360, so 1,360 grams with everything. ESC and motor, this is probably adding 200 grams, maybe a little more. So the chassis alone is probably 1,100 grams, roughly. Let me try this again, hold on. It's about 1,150 probably, if I take about 210 due to the electronics and the wires, which is not a bad weight. It's kind of heavy, I think. Well, DR10, I have to remember. In a previous video that I did with the DR10, I talked about the weight. I think the DR10 may actually be slightly lighter. The Traxxas Slash was way heavier. It was about at least 200 grams, maybe 300 grams heavier than the DR10. But this is good to go. 5-meter connectors. I'll mount these up later, so these you really want to mount somewhere where they will be secure. Let me just move this around. I'll probably mount it just up here. All right, well, I'm going to continue on. So now, every strap, this will just go in here. I actually like these. These are nice. But we need the receiver. So the receiver, this is just going to get a fly sky. That's all it is. It's a simple, inexpensive. If you want to replace a stock system, fly sky, these are actually really good for just basic stuff again. I'm going to mount it this way just because the wire has to come out. Well, the antenna comes in through here, so it's long enough to go in through there, although it doesn't really matter. Alright, here we go. So just checking, perfect, that works. Let's go ahead and send this one in, so this will just go in. Now this goes to channel 2. And one of the nice things about this system is it's pretty inexpensive. It's only, let me go ahead and connect this. It's a 3-channel system, it's only about $40. That's with a transmitter, which is pretty good. I mean, it's good enough for what we're using, what we're doing with it. And let's see, servo. So at this point, might as well connect the servo. So this is the servo. And the servo goes to channel 1. Do not reverse them. And one of the things so previously I made a note, or I made a comment about the metal tabs. That's what I was referring to. So this plastic thing always goes down. So if you look at the receiver just like this, the metal tabs always go up, the plastic goes down. So this goes channel 1. And I should have done channel 1 first. So the antenna. So the antenna, just go ahead and put this in here. And then once it's in there, all you do is place this in here. So there's a little slot in there, and the wire just goes in through the slot. Then you just use a little set screw, it just goes right behind the antenna tube, and that will keep it from sliding out. So here we go. There it is. And I'm going to go ahead and mount those. So these, just remember, they go up. Now, let's see, if you look at these, see there's a left and a right, so just make sure you have that left and right. These will go this way. So we're going to go here, and then the washers that I used were actually supposed to go to the servo. Not a big deal. So let's see, you can always pre-thread these, which is probably what I should have done. I'm just going to put the washers on the bottom. Use these on top. Now keep in mind this is a drag car. The steering is not going to feel as much stress and impact as, say, a short course or something else that's going to be taking some hard impacts or needs to really steer hard one way or the other. So this will actually work. These button screws will work. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten that one all the way, tighten this one all the way. Snug is all you need. Do not over tighten. So let's see. And oh boy. There's a reason why I'm laughing. So, okay, I can tell you. So my wife didn't want to interrupt me right now, so she passed me a note. But then in me reading the note, I forgot to grab this piece, so I'm over here trying to read the note and figuring out where the screw goes. But anyway. Oh, it's a good thing she didn't catch me without my ring. Don't tell her I'm not wearing my ring. I'll get in trouble again. I like getting in trouble. All right, let's see. Here we go. Now I've not touched the servo, so this should be straight. All right, here we go. Now, one of the things too is you want to make sure these are somewhat lined up, and the reason why is if they're not lined up, once you try to put those screws in, they're not going to hold. So make sure they are straight. So I have to on this one as well. Something else that you can do is just measure those holes, and then you can measure these and then make sure you set them to the proper distance. Or you can just eyeball it. It's easier if you measure, which is why I'm kidding. All right, here we go. Now I can set the horn. So the horn will just go up. It'll just go straight up. That's it. And here we go. All right. So this plastic is new. It's difficult to put in there. Just grab this little tiny screw, get some little thread lock compound, and all right, go ahead and drive this in. The screw will help me set the horn in. And that's it. Snug is all you need. Lightly snug. And this is set. So now that the horn's there, I can go ahead and play along with it. This servo here, these are good enough. I forget how much these are, maybe $30 off Amazon. They're good enough for this. They're not as smooth as the Protex, for example, but then again, they're only about a third of the price. So something like this is probably something I would go with. Rage used to make some very good and expensive servos. I mean, those things were maybe about $20. I don't know if they still make servos. I haven't seen them in a while. But for something like this, those were good enough. All right, so I just went ahead and clipped that on. So now that that is clipped on, I can go ahead and move this, and this goes in there. So I just have to push this in, be mindful of this wire. Don't mess anything up. All right, let's see, what am I doing wrong? All right, so I need to jump this over. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen these two screws because now I have the servo, so these are rigid, so I can't move them. So remove this screw, lift up a little. I'm gonna loosen that third one as well. And I'm probably gonna have to loosen the bulkhead, but we'll see. Let me just take these off. There we go. Perfect. So the reason why is in here, there's a little plastic tab, so this thing can't slide in. You have to sort of jump it over. But now it's in there, so I can go ahead and install those 3 screws again. Alright, so after that, go ahead and remove the battery just so I can flip this. Let's see, so we're going to go here, and these go here, these go there. So now I need to install these. These are the ones that go in the back. And I need to, alright, so something that I missed, but that's all right. I can always do that off camera. Right, so let's see. Now, see those little clips? So the wire gets tucked in there. And there's two things you can do. You can either try to just tuck the wire in there or leave some slack and then just push it down below. And then you can try bending the wire up, or you can loosen this entire thing and then set the wire in there. Whatever's easiest for you. But those are little tiny hooks. I mean, they're somewhat nice, but to be honest, if it was just a little hook that would screw on, it would have been better and nicer. This takes some time, so I'm gonna finish that off camera. You can always just leave it like this and then just use some tape and tape it up. That works as well. So it really is up to you. I'm just gonna leave it. But the screws. So these screws, remember, screws that go inside of there. So those are the 4 screws that I'm missing. 1, 2, and then I'm missing these right here. But the ESC is now in the way, so I have to remove the ESC. So these 4 screws that I'm missing here, those are the ones I'm gonna deal with right now, but I'll just do that off camera. I'll do that really quick, so I'll be right back. Right, so unfortunately my video cut out, so I'm gonna just go over some of the things so you don't see installation, but I ended up going with a switch right in here. Now really quick with the receiver, I actually changed the position of the receiver. So originally when I installed the receiver, I installed it flat like this. So say like that, right in there. I actually took it out and I installed it up against the wall like this. So the receiver is sitting inside this way. And by doing that, this now closes perfectly. So it's now perfect. The capacitors, I went in and installed them over here. So they're right over on that side, out of the way. Tie strap to this right in here. So the wires are nice and neat. This, I went in and loosened all of these screws. I didn't take them off, I just loosened all of these screws right here. And then I lifted this up and then I just slid the wire and then just curved it right in. So it's pretty clean. Servo is in there and the trim, I just have to run and then just make sure the trim is set so that it runs straight. But a few notes. So pluses and minuses of this. Now I'm gonna run it later so you're gonna see the running video, but just out of the box, this thing has great tires. Out of the kits, DR10, Drag Slash. This one has probably the best front tires. They're very, very close to the Drag Slash. The Drag Slash does have better rears. They're the same thing, they're just wider. Maybe half a centimeter, maybe it's a full centimeter, but they're just, you have a wider contact patch. Now, this one here, bonuses, metal gears. Drag Slash also has metal gears, DR10 does not, that one has plastic, so that's a plus on this one. The shock caps, a plus on this one as well. You can bleed them through here. Drag Slash just comes with the, I mean, they're horrible shocks. Some point, maybe you'll go GTR, maybe there's no need. There might not be a need. One of the things to notice about the rear, and this is something I do not like about this vehicle. So if you look at the shafts, they're angled up, which is fine, but this is what's going to happen. So as the car rotates, now this is, the purpose of this is they're gonna wanna straighten out, so it's gonna end up happening, I mean, they can't straighten out, but let's just say they could, it would put more pressure on the tire, so it'll give you more traction. That's the idea behind it. The thing is, out of the box. Now keep in mind this is out of the box, no adjustments. And they're still angled up, which will lead to
more wear. Where is it? Well, the little cups inside and the shafts. I can't find it. There we go. That part right in there. So, here we go. So you're just gonna get more wear between these two parts, this part and this part, over time. So you're gonna notice that, and that's one of those things, versus running perfectly flat. Now when the car is running perfectly flat, such as the DR10, drag slash, and then you accelerate, it'll squat, the same thing will happen, and then the shafts will want to straighten out, so it'll try to level up the car. So that's something I like best about the other vehicles versus these, or this one. Now this one, weight, not too bad. It's about 1,150 grams, roughly. Now the links, you do have some, you have 2 adjustments there. And depending on how you run the links, you can get some positive camber or negative camber. So when the suspension flexes, your tire will either stay or it'll give you more camber or less camber. Now these, camera doesn't really show, but they are actually opened. So they're like this. And one of the reasons behind it, now here I'm on a towel, if I were to put this on a flat surface, you would be able to see that because of the way these turn, here, let me I'll just grab my brush real quick. This is pretty flat. All right, so right there, we're on the tire. So that's the problem. That's why they're angled. So if you angle them this way, you'll get a greater contact patch versus if you were straight. And that's a problem with the foams that are inside. If you watch my video on Drag Car Tires, I think I did a comparison between Hoosier's, the drag slash tires, which are the Mickey Thompsons, like these, only wider. I went ahead, cut a piece of the foam out, and then that sort of flattened them out. I did that with the Prolines as well. So those are some of the things to consider. So positives, tires are positive out of the box. They are nice tires. Transmission, shock caps, and metal gears in the gearbox. The negatives on this one, I will say for sure, is the suspension. Just the way this thing lays out. Just for that reason, that the arms, the springs, I mean the rear, you are going to have to definitely tune, but this is very, very hard. There's almost no suspension at all. Now keep in mind, some people actually want a really hard rear end. So this would be perfect. If you don't, then, well, you don't. But that's something to consider. So this may actually be the perfect setup for things that some of you may be looking for, may not for other people. If you go softer, you'll actually lose some of the force, some of the torque to the suspension as it squats, because the suspension is actually absorbing it. Versus harder rear suspension, you'll lose less of that force and more of it will go, but then you run the risk of wheeling, right? The front end will want to come off because there's nothing to absorb that initial impact when you accelerate. So driving style, you have to get used to it. Front end, DR10 I think still has the better front end, but this one's not bad. I like the gull wings. Drag slash doesn't have them, so that's a negative on that. But all in all, it's a good platform. You can't really go wrong with it, although once I drive it, maybe I'll change my mind, but as of now, I think DR10 is probably the way to go if you want stock. This, if you want to modify it heavily, well, it already has a transmission to go with, but keep in mind the drag slash, you can drop that differential, although I don't think the drag slash is worth getting just for that differential because of all the other components. But comment below, what are your thoughts? Which one would you pick and why?
Oh, my hair! My tongue! My rod!